Hello and welcome to the Arsenal Industry Podcast, episode 24. For those of you new to the show, this is the podcast where I interview the most influential people from the worlds of stand-up, comedy, radio, TV, and today, promoting. Peter Walsingham runs the legendary tryout night at the Downstairs at the King's Head Comedy Club. It has run for over 20 years and is one of the most sought-after nights in the capital. To the point of, I think he mentioned in the podcast, there's about a 5-month waiting list for anyone who wants to book today, which is amazing. He's very open about the fact that he runs the club in conjunction with a whole other life and a whole other career that he does outside of comedy. We talk about how that is, how he juggles the two, and why he keeps them completely separate. He's never done a podcast before. It was kind of his first interview, and in it, he stated very openly that normally he doesn't, just because he doesn't see him as an interesting part of the club. It's not, he's sort of in the background of it, sorting it all out. He's not the focal point, and it's just a really interesting way that he could look at that. We also talk about his loyalty to performers, and not just comedians, we're talking musicians and writers who have been with him for years, and the value of variety in keeping his nights fresh and interesting for both him and his audiences. We also go into detail about his policy of turning away stag and hen parties, which in the current climate of a lot of clubs kind of trying to attract big groups of people, it's a really interesting model that his club kind of sticks to their laurels and sticks to their guns on how they've always been. Even to the point that he makes comedians, I think he's the only night I know of who makes comedians ring up at 9 o'clock in the morning to book a spot. Everyone else has an email, and we get into that and why that is a historical layover from when he started out the night when there was no internet. So it's a really interesting interview, and one of my favourite parts was his secret book of notes, which he keeps and has kept since his first gig, where he writes down feedback and notes on what he thinks of every performance that has taken place at his club. It's amazingly interesting, and it really gives you an insight as to how to run a really good comedy night, but also the background, and also like how the circuit has evolved and how his clubs had to evolve while sticking to the model and the ethos and just the way that they were originally founded. Not going to say too much more, but very quickly, if you haven't already, please hit subscribe. There's loads of other podcasts like this that are coming out. If you have time, if you could review it in iTunes, that would be amazing. It really helps out. We're 1 off 30 reviews. Please, someone, you don't even have to write anything. Just hit the 5-star thing if you think it was worth that. Don't lie. But if you think it was worth 5 stars, please hit the 5-star mark, and it will take us over 30, which would make me immeasurably happy. Join the Facebook group. It's called Arsenal Industry Podcast. It's on Facebook. You should be able to find it. It's sort of a private group, but only so that I don't get spammers. So just join and I'll accept you, no matter who you are, whatever kind of performance you do. Even if you're not a performer and you're just a member of the public and you want to see more about what goes on behind the scenes, join. You're all welcome. It's absolutely fine. Thank you very much to my latest patron, which is Alfie Nooks. You can hear more about him in episode 21. He's a comedy club promoter who runs the We Are Funny project and is still crowdfunding his potential big investment in a whole new purpose-built comedy club in London. If you want to find out more about that, you can go to bit.ly.com/fund the project. All the details are there. Thank you so much for joining the patrons. If you want to join the patrons and you want to support this podcast on an ongoing basis, please do. From $1, that will cost you 80p an episode. It's really not that expensive. If you want more details on that, please look back in the pods. A couple of episodes ago, I just printed like a 10-minute explanation on what Patreon is, but essentially it just gives me a budget. It helps me out. And it takes a lot of pressure financially off of trying to run this show. So if you can join and you can donate from $1, it's really not that expensive. And if enough of you do it, I can really put more time and effort into these. And I can really put more time and effort into getting the live shows up and running, which would be so exciting. I'm so pumped for that. Okay. If you don't want to do that and you want to do a one-off donation, please do it on PayPal. You can find all links on the website. Really quickly, my Edinburgh show, as I've said in a few pods before, but if this is your first one, my Edinburgh show. I am going up to Edinburgh and doing the whole month. I was at Cowgate Head. Please ignore that in the programme. That has been ruined by a number of factors. As a result, I've had to relocate my show. I am now at Just the Tonic Caves. I'm in the spare room. I'm at 7:30 p.m, so the same time. and I'm doing every single day except the 19th and the 24th, I think. So you can find all the details on the website. Please do come. You can reserve a free ticket, which means you have a guaranteed seat on my website. They're all on Eventbrite, so if you're a member of that, just go and have a browse. It really helps me get an idea of how many people are coming and what days I'll have to promote more and less and whatever. It's just an experiment to see if people will reserve tickets for free shows, which don't cost you anything. It's not like you're paying up front. It's a completely free show, donations at the end. But so please do reserve a ticket if you're going to come. And without any more delays, this is Peter Walsingham.
Well, we're an old club, so we're sort of loyal to a lot of people, many of whom don't do the circuit so much. So if you're looking at an average, there are going to be some comics who you'd think are top of the bill types who might play slightly more often because they're pulls. But I would imagine somebody would play here 2, maybe 3 times a year, and we do 2 regular shows a week on the Saturday and Sunday, which for established comics, and then the Thursday we do a tryout night where we see 14 new people doing 5 minutes each, which we bleed through into the weekends when they're ready. And we do other stuff as well, so there's things like Joke Thieves and one-off shows. But on an average, I'd say 3 times a year. If you ring as a comic now and want to get a tryout spot today, you're normally looking at a 5-month wait. So even as a tryout, you're going to do it less than twice a year.
Yeah, quite in demand. The interesting part for me is that you ring in for your club to actually book, which is quite unusual now, I'd say.
Old school.
Is there a reason for that?
Yes, because anybody who... I have other jobs to do, I have another life, and I don't want the phone going all day. Emailing, so many people will say, here are my dates, and then you reply and say, well, let's do the 4th, and then they say, well, it's gone now, or vice versa. So you end up in an eternal loop of, on the phone, I expect you to have your diary open, I've got mine open, and it's done, And once it's in the book, it's in the book, and then about a week before, you'll get a confirmation email, just with the running orders and all of that kind of stuff. But it's partly a filter, and I do 9 to 11 in the mornings just to get the fuckers up. Because I just believe that if you're serious about this business, you'll be up, working.
Yeah.
And so many people say, "Oh, I don't get up till 12."
Fuck 'em.
Yeah, well, it's just a filter to stop the phone from going all day. But it's also a lot faster for you to ring up and just say, "What's the next date available?" We check our diaries and it's done. We don't have to to and fro with. I've got something else come in now.
So it's kind of a historical thing that's kept going through.
This is from before the days of the interweb. We used to do it by carrier pigeon when we started, but found them unreliable.
Like comedians.
Yes, well, certainly more reliable than a lot of comics. My wife says, "Why do I treat comics like children?" When you find out they've been driving around the completely wrong town to look for a gig, then you realise that some of them aren't that bright.
There was that famous one recently. Who
Sean Walsh went to Hereford instead of Hartford. Yeah,
it's pretty bad. I mean, you don't live in London.
No, I live out of London. Yeah.
Is there a reason why do you live in London when you started this?
Yeah. So I still live around the corner from here, and that's hence why we were here. I've got grown-up children and dogs, and my other work. I work from home, and didn't want to be in town. Now, it's a financial choice as well. You can get more for your money getting out of London.
So, you live in Cambridge, right?
I live between London and Cambridge, yes.
So what's the circuit like there? Have you thought about starting a night?
The thing is, the circuit, I run this room. I don't really go much elsewhere. A lot of people say, how do you, what's the state of the circuit? Well, I only hear it by osmosis, through other comics. I speak to other promoters, and I've been around since the beginning of the circuit, so I know most of the people. I go to comedy beanos and conferences and those kind of things. It's where you get the tenor of what the world is like. But a lot of comics will say, how do you, how should I be doing? What should be my next stage? Well, I don't know, because I don't run a Friday night in Romford to a bunch of rugby players, or I don't run a Tuesday afternoon gig in a library to WI. You know, I run my room, and I put in what I like here. I've booked for other places in the past. Used to, book for the Comedy Cafe, and I've booked for a lot of provincial theatres, and I still run a few shows out of town. But it's in my image, it's what I want to see.
So, as for this particular room, how did you discover? Was it just because it was the most local venue?
Yeah. My old partner Hugh Thomas, who was a lecturer of mine at Middlesex Poly, as it was then, he had done a few shows in the first days of the Comedy Store, been gonged off, but liked the vibe of it, and it was of that time, and it was different, and he wanted to do something similar that wasn't a bear pit, and was more supportive and nurturing for developing talent. So we set up a few shows here in late '81, just doing one-offs. There were a few acts around then, like Arnold Brown and those sort of people who were the first people at the Comedy Store. But so this was the room, and the then landlord, Malcolm and Sue, who lived here with their family. It was very different in those days with pubs. Just said, go ahead, use the room, and then it developed from there. Really, we just continued with the same ethos. The room's got a good reputation for being nice audiences. We discourage idiots.
How do you actively discourage idiots? What's your...
offer to show them my penis, and they're usually quick out of the door then. No, you should really be on top of that at the point they come in. Some people will show themselves through the course of an evening, and you don't expect. If you've got your eye on one nutter, they'll usually be out-nutted by somebody else. We do have to eject people very occasionally, but it's usually the peer pressure works in this room, because the bulk of the people who come here have been before, and they know what the vibe is and won't tolerate idiocy.
So you get a lot of repeat audiences?
Well, we used to say nobody ever comes here twice. They keep coming. Yes, I'd imagine an average audience member perhaps comes here 6 times a year, maybe less, but touch wood, we're still selling out.
Does that impact your decision on who to book? Because I imagine you don't.
Yes, we used to have a character who came in the early days, who shall remain nameless. Gerald Wellesby was his name, who was cursed with a photographic memory and would sit in the front row, and if he heard any material that anybody had done in the last 12 years, he'd tut under his breath. Nobody else could hear except the performer. And to his credit, some years later he had a go at doing it himself, and did a very good strong 5 minutes on condition that I said, the deal is you come back in 6 weeks and do a completely different 5 minutes. And he came back and did something about 10 weeks later and struggled and fell back on some material that he knew had worked the last time. And one member of an audience who'd learnt to who could now understand implicitly why people repeat material and how difficult it is to bleed new.
Did you tut?
No, we didn't tut, but he did have for a while I can't remember whether this is true or not, but we seem to remember it, that he'd sometimes read the paper if he'd have seen an act before. So I think when he came on, a few of us had a paper ready.
It sounds like there's no progression ladder here as such, because you...
Of course there is, that's what the Thursdays are for.
Well, no, but you book who you like, so it's not quite as linear as if you just... Is there like a meritocracy to it, where like, we don't use the word headliner here. Okay. I actively avoid it.
Right.
You might be the last act on, but you're not the headliner. You're the final act on. And I instruct MCs to avoid using that word. I don't like it. I think it puts an undue pressure on the performer and an undue expectation on the audience. You know, whether you're on at the beginning of the show or whenever, you've still got to get here and do your time and deliver the goods. I mean, it's obviously, if we've got somebody like Eddie Izzard or whatever playing here, I generally put him on in the middle of the evening, you know, because it's an undue pressure on somebody having, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We'll put him up before the interval, so that. Anyway, I mean, we generally don't announce any of those names when they come back and visit us from the past, but a lot still do, because I mean, I forget that generally most acts will have said this is the first paid gig they did in London. I forget that, you know, so they have a fond memory of the place and still loyal to it.
You're talking about like people who at the moment who are doing like circuits or...
Oh yeah, they'll come and warm up stuff for TV if they want to run 10 minutes in, or they've got a tour coming up, want to run material in. So most people pop in now and again. I mean, there are very few people who've not played here at one point or another, including, you know, Louis C.K. and Jon Stewart and you know, big international names as well, you know.
So the main way of moving up the ladder is by impressing you directly. You're the
Yeah. I don't. You know, people say I'll send you my CV or my video. You know, I want to see how you work this room. You know, I tend to listen less to material and watch how people work. You know, how they communicate and what sort of contact they make with an audience. This isn't theatre. It's not television. It's about being in this room at that time.
And you've been around for 20, 30 years now. So
Yeah.
do you think new clubs that are starting out with the same kind of ethos as you would be able to build such a reputation?
Of course, yeah. As I say, I don't visit that many clubs, but why not? You know, I mean, there's loads of niche clubs starting now with, you know, geek comedy or whatever. If you do something for your own audience, you know. I mean, the only rule I generally give new performers when they ask for advice is, you know, do what you think is funny. You know, don't try and tailor it to be like someone you admire, or do something that you think is going to get you work. Just do the truth. You know, do what you find funny. It may not work for years, but if you know, you will find it eventually. You'll find your voice. But there's absolutely no reason why any club couldn't start tomorrow. And you know, if they look after their audiences and they look after their performers, and you know, all the ancillary staff, why you can't do something similar? I mean, in the same way, you could set up a club that was horrific if you wanted to, but it's not what I would want to go and see. But,
You do, I mean, you only run clubs, you don't perform at all.
no.
So do you think that's the difference? I mean, because a lot of clubs...
No, I'm funnier than most people. That's the truth of it. And if I went on stage, nobody would stand a chance. No, I've never been tempted by it, really. You know, I do have an ability to remember most jokes. You know, I have a brain for that. So I do spot somebody very quickly if it's purloined, and I usually tell them I know who that joke belongs to, or that it's 52 years old, and don't think you can get away with it because I know it exists. No, I don't want to perform. I know it sounds trite, but it's a genuine pleasure, even after 30 odd years, at the end of an evening, to watch an audience file out knowing that they've had 2.5 hours out of their life, you know, just switched off and enjoying themselves. You know?
Yeah, you enjoy promoting?
Yeah, of course. Well, if I don't, I won't get in the car. And, you know, people say, why do you still do it? You know, apart from the huge amounts of money that I've ripped off from performers over the years, you know, there's no money in this. You know, I don't make much money out of it, but I genuinely enjoy watching new people come through, and there are always going to be new people. At the moment, as I said, if you've got a 5-month waiting list, multiply that by, you know, 4 and a bit weeks, 4 and a bit times 14, 15, you're looking at hundreds of people waiting to get on the ladder. You know, differing abilities and and chances. But there's only 2 or 3 people in 30 years that I've said don't ever come back, and they've needed mental help or a police custody. But people can come and die here as much as they like. It doesn't matter.
So you'll actively tell someone if they're not good, or you think they're not.
People ask for my advice. I keep notes on everybody who's ever been here. Every Thursday, I keep notes, 4 or 5 sentences on everybody's performance ever, since back to 1986, which was our first tryout night. So, if you've ever played here, I will have a sentence on every, a few sentences on every time you've been here on a Thursday night. And that's how I can watch people develop and make sure they're ready to move on. We move straight 15-minute paid slots here, no 10s. And I know when people are ready for this room. I mean, they may already be playing many other rooms, but they might not suit this room.
Do you ever worry that, like, say you see someone do a really good 5 at your tryout night, and then you book them for a 15, they don't have 15?
Yeah, but I know, I can see, I'm experienced enough to know that they've got strength in depth. I mean, there's plenty of examples of performers who've been catapulted for very zeitgeisty reasons, being in the right place at the right time and whatever, who aren't ready. And there are other people who I've seen over the years who are fully formed on first showing. Somebody like Mark Lamar, who, when he started, didn't really have much in the way of material, but he was just really able to work a room, very watchable and competent. And there's still those sort of people coming through now and again. And that's a real pleasure when you see that, There are some people I will book for the first time I see them. And, it does happen. But most people, you need, it's like any job. You need to learn the ropes. And, there's an analogy, correlation with the old theatre thing of doing the reps. You'd go out and work hard for little money for a few years so that you could deal with any eventuality and you were ready when the time came,
Would you ever tell a comedian to just stop?
As I say, 2 or 3 people over the years, but they've been, either physically dangerous or so obnoxious, we won't have so many acts now, so many young acts come out, and it's quite graphic sexual material, and you just think, well, it's a cheap route, I'd rather see somebody crash and burn gloriously with interesting ideas than, common denominator, laddish stuff. And it's coming from the women as well. There's a lot of... And I don't know whether that's because other clubs are harder to play and they have to have that material under their belt, but it's certainly not what I want to see here. It's not what this place is about. But in terms of telling people not to work again, very few over the years. I've made it clear that I might not find their stuff, I don't think it's suitable for here, but if they adjust and learn the biggest trick of the game, which is the only trick any good comic should know, which is called, knowing how to play the room. Every room is different, every night is different. You might be in the same room on a different night or on the same day, It's going to change, and the skill is being able to read and play a room. So if you come down here and do knob gags and rape references, you should be sensible enough to realise that that's not going to work here. Might somewhere else, but not here.
Have like a downstairs at the King's Head 5.
If that's what you want to call it. But then you should do that, because you wouldn't go on Christian television and do fucking my sister material,
Yeah.
You won't get that gig.
No. But you won't be invited back anyway.
If you get a cruise to a mixed audience with family on board, well paid, you're not going to last long if you don't play to that audience. If you're serious about this business, you should be able to, be able to sit on a game show panel and do what's needed for that. Be able to do 40 minutes to camera, or 30 minutes to a rough crowd, or an hour to a, semi-comatose Tuesday afternoon literary festival or whatever, play the room.
It's interesting you should say maybe other clubs you have to maybe, have the harsher or more crass material because that's the way they are. I mean, there are certain clubs that are known for, getting stag parties in or
Yeah, which is something we actively avoid, I've so many times had phone calls for large bookings and I've just turned them away to someone else, Don't want them. It's not what a good comedy club, it's not what our comedy club is about. If you're going to go to one of those rooms that has Groupon things, people made no commitment to the show, and it's interesting that some chains that supposedly their unique selling point is that they're a comedy club, the word comedy is the last part of the sentence. It's dance, eat, drink, laugh, So it shows you what is really going on there in terms of how the chain, they just see that as a means to an end to get bums on seats. I won't ever do a free show, even if it's 50p to get in, at least you've made a contract, and that 50p is something I can give back when I tell you to leave. I can say, right, I don't want you here, here's your quid back,
That's interesting because, what do you make of the other free clubs that are out there at the moment? Things like Barry Ferns' Angel Comedy that gets in a massive audience but pay what they want at the way out.
Well, you're still saying pay. There's a pay structure there. I don't go. I haven't seen them working. I'm sure. I'm sure a lot of them are fine. I think you create your own audience, and that's fine if you can control that. What I'm talking about are the sort of gigs where a pub, say, has said, well, here's a budget for a performance, and you're going to be next to the jukebox and the slot machine, and there's been no investment by people. You just wander through because they've not paid to get in, so what's to stop them going in and out and not paying attention and coming in for a chat? A good compare should make a room work, but I understand the principle of free clubs. I don't have a problem with them. I don't see how, if you're going to make a living out of it, it becomes much more than a hobby otherwise.
In terms of, so someone at my level, I'm about 4.5 years in. I haven't got an audience as such for my own stuff.
Yeah.
Like if I do a preview, I had like 15 at my last preview, for example. So I get a few people down, but I had to do it as pay what you want on the way out.
Yeah.
Because they weren't going to pre-book.
Yeah.
So
why would they not pre-book?
I don't know.
Well, did you? It's. Everything's part of the game now, and I have no problem with it whatsoever. But if you want stage time, yes, put a stage up. But somebody's got to pay for the mics, and somebody's got to do the publicity. That takes time, energy, and finance. There's only so far you can go with that. Unless you're on a deal with the bar when they're saying, we'll get a percentage of that. When you say free clubs, I didn't realise you meant pay what you think, or pay what you want. That's different. That's because you should. Edinburgh Free Fringe has been a good example of how actually you can come out of that experience better off than doing it the other way, and that's entirely laudable.
So do you think? So maybe 3 should only be for open mic stuff more.
No, I'm not saying anything.
Okay.
I'm just saying it's not something I would do.
Okay.
Because I don't, apart from the tryout nights, I don't put any shows on where I don't pay someone.
Okay.
If you do one of my shows, you get paid. It's a door split. It might be shit, but you will get paid, and it will be a fair split. The split being that I get most of it, and you get very little of it. No,
I'm kidding.
I'm sure you can hear the laughter.
I'm kidding.
Ringing round. No, that's also, we pay on time and fairly. If you want to do this professionally, I presume you want to be paid for it. And a lot of acts who might not work for as little as you get paid here will continue to play here because what they get is a nice ride and a comedy cognizant crowd and a room that is run properly, for audiences and performers.
There was a few talks last year Chortle did a load of stuff about whether the circuit's in crisis, and I presume you wouldn't have much to say on that because you don't really do or go around the circuit.
Well, as I hear it from everybody else. You know, they've been saying the bubble was going to burst about 9-10 years after it started, in about 1989, and it's continued to be about to burst since then. The circuit will always find its own level. You know, there will always be gigs to 3 men and a dog, and the same 5 acts staring at each other beforehand. Yeah. It won't. It may change its spots. It may downsize, but the cream will always, come to the top. You know, badly run rooms won't last, and well-run rooms should. I mean, the slight difference between this and many other entertainment formats is that most comedy clubs are shows that run in other rooms, in pubs and theatres, and might run on a weekly or monthly basis. People don't own the bricks and mortar. I don't here. I lease from the brewery, as it were. But at any point they could say, right, we're bulldozing the place, and I don't have a say in that. I'd get 6 months notice, and we'd have to move. But I mean, we reckon we're the oldest club still in its original home. So I don't think the bubble has burst. I mean, if you look down the TV listings and see how much is comedy led, in terms of programming, there's no way that comedy's in a bad way at the moment. It's not a minority sport by any means.
No, not at all. But a lot of the comedy listings are either game shows or panel shows that have been around for a while.
But they're fed by people who've come through the circuit. The circuit still exists. As I say, it may sort itself out and slim down a bit, but I haven't. Clubs are still opening. It used to be that if the Bible would be time out, and you'd look through, you'd have a page of listings for each day of the week. There were that many clubs around, but I don't think they, no matter what they told you, you'd wonder how many of them could sustain themselves.
What's because a lot of club owners have commented on Time Out, like the traction from that dropping.
Yes, but that's been a natural victim of print media, and everything moving into electronic, information. That's how it's spread now. We rely, and I think any good business does now, on a mixture of traditional methods and new social media. None works independently. Not one thing. I mean, a good example. A lot of businesses now, you've been told you've got to tweet and you've got to get likes and this and that. Yes, it all helps, but it's not in isolation. Then it's not enough unless your tweeting is into the million mark. Yeah. We had an occasion here recently with an act who was on, a well-known act, who was on unannounced, and particularly unannounced because he didn't have a visa to do live performance here. He was just had a work permit to do broadcast, but he wanted to do a couple of gigs, as he often does when he comes here over. And I said, he appeared unannounced on a bill, and he was on the next night. And I said, look, it's a Sunday night. It won't be as busy tomorrow. Sundays are a lot quieter. And he said, well, I'll tweet it. And I said, well, I thought you weren't allowed to do so. He said, oh, fuck it, I don't mind. And in the hour it took me to leave, from leaving here that night and getting home, in that hour the show had sold out in an hour from one tweet. And I saw him the next night and said, do you know how many followers do you have? He said, I have about 160,000. I said, well, that's extraordinary because we sold out in an hour. He said, oh, well, Alan Carr retweeted it. Now, Alan Carr's got 3.5 million, and when you consider that's 1/20 of the population, and out of that, you're probably going to hit most people who like comedy who've opted in for, so within an hour, you could hit every comedy fan who's got the tweet on, or looking at the tweets. So that at that level, those things are useful. But for most clubs, it's difficult to get tens of thousands of followers, or So the old rule used to be, for theatrical fly postering and for leafleting and whatever, was that 1% would be a good mark to hit. So if you had 10,000 leaflets done and they cost 150 quid, that would mean that you hopefully get 100 people responding to that. And if your ticket was 10 quid a ticket, then it's worthwhile, because you've made your money. You can do your sums on that. Yeah. But I think it's the same with all advertising. Not advertising, I don't mean advertising, I just mean listings. We don't do any advertising as such. We don't pay for any. Just put the listings in and make sure that our mailing lists are well, looked after, and people, you have to opt in to join our Facebook groups. You choose to. You don't automatically get put on them by any means. So we have probably smaller mailing lists and smaller Facebook groups than most clubs, but they're very loyal. And if I say that X is coming next week, I notice they jump on it, I mean, for instance, we've got something happening here next month, which I don't know when this goes out.
Probably in May.
Yeah, it'll be gone. Caitlin Moran,
Oh wow.
She comes down. She'll do a whole evening down here. I don't need to tell anybody. I'll just put the word out, and it'll sell out in minutes.
I'd come to that.
Yeah. She's great.
Yeah, she's awesome.
Yeah, and she does an hour and a half of stand-up without ever having done stand-up.
Yeah.
She's fantastic.
I didn't know she did stand up.
No, she doesn't.
No.
That's the sort of thing we do down here that you never know about. We do the same with music as well. A lot of well-known bands play down here for whatever reason, for charity or just because they want to have a play. Snow Patrol did it last year, and we've had the Eurythmics used to be across the road, so we used to do a Wednesday night with the Eurythmics where they just whoever was in the studio would come down, and one night we had basically Eurythmics back line, rhythm section, and we had Harry Dean Stanton on harmonica and Bill Wyman. It was just like a jam, with well-known people.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't pretend you've Googled me or know who I am.
No, I don't. As I say, I don't. I don't. I only do what I need to do. And that's the thing. It's about, if you come and do a show for me, if you come and do a 5 minutes, I will make notes on you and remember who you are. But I wouldn't look you up beforehand and find out what you'd done or what you were doing. I mean, I get lent on a lot by promoters to book blind, but I don't and never have done. Even if it's somebody who is already touring stadiums, I still ask them to come down and do 5 minutes, because I've made mistakes in the past booking blind. People telling us how brilliant they are in their CVs, and they've done every mirth control gig in Portsmouth. It doesn't tell me anything.
Well, I was only going to say, because my day job, I work in social media.
Yeah.
So I'm aware that having 600 fans that care is better than 20,000 a day.
Yeah, and you said I was very difficult to find anything on.
Yeah.
Because you don't need to know about me. You need to come and have a good night here. I'm not important to all of this. It's not about me. There are other club runners who will always tell you it's about them. But even Don Ward, keeps his head down, runs a good club. When you don't go to the theatre and ask who the general manager is, you go to see the show.
Makes sense.
Oh.
So you, in a way, you think, or I don't want to put words in your mouth, but in a way, do you think that a good comedy club runner or a good comedy club promoter is in the background, if anything?
Yeah, I mean, I would generally suggest that you don't run and MC your own club. I mean, run a club well or MC a club well. But if you're going to MC your club, get somebody else to run it that night for you so that you can concentrate on that, and the other person can concentrate on making sure that the audience is looked after and everything's running properly and the sound's right and the lighting's right and all that kind of stuff. But I do. Promoters, they shouldn't be self-promoting, they should be promoting the show.
You said earlier that there are like theme nights coming up around London, things like the Pun Run or
well, you were asking about clubs that could set up and maintain themselves on a low or no income and create audiences. Well, yeah, you create your audiences by providing something that people want, or teaching people to want it.
Which one did you do?
A bit of both, really. We actively discourage the sort of audiences that aren't bright enough to listen.
Yeah, so when you set up, when you started, did you have like a theme in mind, or did you just want to run?
Just to be friendly and supportive. But there was no circuit then. There were 5-6 clubs, if that. And it didn't really have a name. It used to be called Cabaret. I mean, the Time Out section was called Cabaret, and then it changed to Comedy in 89, 80, 90, something like that. I can't remember. You can look that up. And there was a big hoo-ha then about whether it should be changed from alternative cabaret to comedy. Because the early bills would be variety bills. It would be very unusual to have more than 2 straight comics on one of those bills. You'd have a double act, some sort of special act. You might be a clown or a juggler, and you'd certainly have some music in there. So it was old, sort of through line from the variety bills of the 50s and the end of the peer shows, but with different content.
Did you move into just being comedy because the audiences wanted it, or because that was just...
No, we still do music, and my bills, if you ever look at them, are actually still quite rooted in variety. It's very rare that you'll get 5 stand-ups in a row, and at Compare you'll have something else in there. And if there are 5 stand-ups, they'll all be very different types, and different rhythms and different content and different energies.
When you were talking about TV, do you think TV's impacted people's viewing habits when they come out to live?
Oh yeah, no, there's of course. There's a second generation audience now that have only experienced comedy in the big rooms. This is still rather like rock and roll, If you're into it and know what and enjoy seeing stuff up close and real, and if you're into music, you'll be going to the various clubs around the country that used to be frequented by A&R men, and the correlation there is with comedy is that these sort of rooms is where you learn your trade, get good at it, and then, as ever, telly will cream off the top. They make no investment in new talent at all. They let the market do that. And then, of course, that feeds, because right at the top end there's money to be made from telly, but the big money is in touring the big rooms. So in order to get 3,000 people into a large theatre at 25 quid a pop, you've got to be on telly, and then those, good percentage of those people will be going to see you because you're on telly, but they wouldn't ever have been in a local comedy club. So yes, there's a second generation. Some are bleeding back in, some have always been coming. There's always enough people out there to fill rooms. You've got to find them. And then when they're in, you've got to teach them, what it's about, how to behave, what a good dynamic is between performer and audience member, where not to cross the line.
But it feels like to me, because of the way TV's gone and because of the way the internet has sort of lowered people's attention span for content online, or I feel like it has, it might be a bit like the generation, like the generation above the generation at the moment is sort of a dying breed of people that like clubs like this, and maybe...
Well, what's the attention span? I mean, if you're able to watch 26 minutes of Friends on the telly, which might be, that might be your parcel of attention before you go out and get something out of the fridge. You know, most comedy sets are 20 minutes long. You know, it's the job of the performer to engage your attention for that long. I mean, the one thing that saddens me now is not so much attention spans. It's the fact that most people want to watch life through a screen. So even if you do go to a gig, something live, you're going to be recording it through your iPhone or whatever, and not actually be in the room. You've already created a barrier. You know, and you get home and watch it, and it's not what you remember it to be, because and that's why television can never, ever really recreate what it's like to see a live comedy gig, because it immediately creates a fourth wall.
Yeah,
and the whole thing about this medium is there is no fourth wall. It's about sharing the time. You know, there may be a stage. You can't see this on your program, but there's a carpet here at ground level. You know, everybody's on the same level. It's like being in a lounge.
I jokingly said to a friend the other day that because everyone feels comfortable in their own lounge, when you're watching a show through a screen, you're just trying to make it more like your lounge because you're watching a TV screen.
Yeah.
Because you feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, but you know, you're not allowed to do it here. If we see you doing it, we ask you to turn it off. Partly because you haven't got permission from the performer. You know, and that's your. You know, you can have spent, you know, years working out a strong 10-minute set, and then to find that somebody's nicked it in Kuala Lumpur without you ever knowing it, because it's been bled over there through through the internet. You don't have any control over it then, and you know that's not fair. If everybody signed a thing to say it is for personal use and it's only me who's going to watch it, that's fine. But that didn't stop people, you know, illegally downloading films and music. You can't. The floodgates are open. You can't stop that. So, but I think it's a shame that if you come for a night out and you actually experience the night by keeping your eye on the focus on your phone. You know.
About to be finished, but
yeah. What's the next question?
Well, it was going to be about. I mean, your reputation has obviously been built over years of bringing down and putting on great shows. Were there any other landmarks in the history of the club that maybe helped accelerate that?
Not really. No, just keep going. You know, keep going. I am blowing my own trumpet, but my instinct is good. You know, I know people that will be good. We grab them early, and you'll often see people here at the beginning of their careers who, you know, 2 years later you'll see all over the place. But we can spot those. Keep the quality and the value up of everything you put on. You know, don't overcharge. I mean, I've done lots of big shows for charities and stuff in the Palladium and bigger rooms. You know, that I've just run. But this is the heart of it, and this is we just keep going. And I mean, as long as there's a bottom end of the pyramid wanting to invest time and you know, energy into learning the trade and sticking with it. You know, I see a lot of part-time people who have a bash at it or just doing it for a bet. But I'll see people who are serious about it and want to learn. You know, and we will always provide a stage for them. And then that keeps the place from stagnating. It means you've always got a next generation.
Do you think because you don't want to be a comedian and because you have other jobs to subsidise what this... I mean, obviously this makes you money.
I'm a male prostitute, and I made £8 last year, and I was working every weekend. That's how I subsidise this place.
Well, no, my question was going to be, do you think because it's basically your side project, your main job, is that fair to say? It's your... I mean,
no, this is what I like most.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm lucky enough to get other work, doing other stuff. But I don't talk about that here. This is not relevant. You know, what I do here is what I do here, and when I'm in a recording studio doing something else, that I don't talk about having a comedy club. You know.
Yeah.
No, we're well known. We're well liked, and you know, as an audience, you will have a good night out here. It's very rare that you don't. So no major landmarks. We just keep your head down and do things right.
And do things your own way.
Yeah, in the same way I will tell a comic to only do something they find funny. There's lots of well-known comics who I don't book much here because they're not suitable. They're very popular elsewhere, but it's not suitable for this room. They set up the wrong energy. The content, it might be, in my book, misogynistic or edging on racist. It's not what I'm interested in. I'd rather have something a bit more meaty to think about and laugh with and act.
Who are your favourite comedians? Or current favourites?
There aren't any, I think the best comedy night is a mixed bill, not going to see one person do half a show and a support act.
Okay.
I've got plenty of favourites over the years, but all for different reasons.
Okay. And do you prefer to watch? Because if you're a fan of ideas, do you prefer to watch like a new person that you've not seen before try out something new, or do you prefer to watch like the established comic that you've seen
Both.
for years?
I mean, there are acts who I know their act backwards. I've seen them so often, and I've seen the same lines in the same order, but I wouldn't book them unless those lines in that order didn't work every time. And the same way, it's always interesting to watch a new act, especially one I've not seen before. I watch everybody, and if I'm not here, I have other people, doing the same thing on my behalf and reporting back. But the one night I tend to try and make sure I'm here is the Thursdays, which is the one night I make no money out of.
Okay. And I noticed that there's been a few people that have recorded their Edinburgh sort of DVD.
We've done a whole radio series and all sorts of stuff from down here, because just people like the room, Sean Locke did 12 Stories High, a radio series here originally. Done lots of DVD and, mostly CD, radio recording stuff. But I can tell you now, and might be a scoop for you, but we're having a big refurb later in the year, and one of the things that we'll be doing down here is rigging the room for at least 3 cameras just stuck in the room, so that becomes very easy. You don't have to bring a lot of gear down, and there'll be switching gear down here so that you just drop it straight into a hard disk, all the footage, and go away and edit it. We can already do that for sound here. We're well set up for sound, but so for video and streaming, we're looking at ways of making it work both ways as well, so we can do stuff, taking stuff from the internet and interacting with that live.
So is that like the way you want the club to go? You want more shows to come here and be performed?
Yeah, but I'm making it future-proof, so that if we set the stuff up, I'll wait for the ideas to come in. I've already had a lot of interest from people who've said, I've always wanted to do something like this, but the infrastructure hasn't been here, hasn't been available. Well, that's what we're doing.
So people could come and do their Edinburgh show kind of thing, and
but also you could project, you could film stuff, you could interact with stuff on the internet. You could have a 2-way thing with another club elsewhere in the world live, all that kind of stuff. All sorts of options available.
So is it a case of that all goes through you or through the pub, or is it like...
No, that's my investment. Yes, I would be putting that gear in,
Right.
Yeah.
So all these lights and things, they're your...
A bit of both. I mean, the lights that shine downwards onto you are owned by the pub, but the sound gear and that kind of stuff partly is owned by the pub. They keep a bit back for their... But, most of the outboard, bigger gear I will bring in. But they're actually making a big investment this year, the pub, so, the brewery. So it's my job to put them on the map, but that's always been the case, That's been the deal, that they get a good reputation, and they don't really have, they have somebody else doing the work for it, really.
So you said that you don't really pay for marketing. You do your own email newsletter.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm saying we don't take out a lot of advertising space or pay third parties to. I'm constantly being approached by this or that media agency to target this or that. It's a small room. We take 100 or so people here, and we can do all right, just word of mouth. But we've got 30 years behind us, so that helps.
Yeah, I was going to say, do you think, because new clubs now, to get people in and then get them signed to a mailing list and stuff, there's so many clubs that they can kind of take and pick their choose. There's not this legacy that your one has.
Absolutely.
So do you think that kind of still helps you in a way that it might not help a new club?
I don't know. I mean, we've had lots of comedy clubs attempt to open here on our doorstep, and other promoters said, "Oh, you're not going to put a brick through the window." He said, "No, go ahead, because it all helps. It will all, everything settles and finds its level. But having said that, this one keeps going. So yeah, legacy is one thing, but I can imagine it is that much harder now to kick something like this off. When we started, there was probably 10 rooms around London, and we would be the North London one, was Red Rose down the road, and that's long gone now, and the Earth Exchange up at Highgate, long before you were born.
Well, there also wasn't that many comedians.
No.
Do you think, in a way, because there's such a low barrier to entry to start being a comedian, especially with the number of nights there are now, do you think there are too many people trying it at the moment?
I don't mind if 5 million try it, you could say tomorrow that you could join the musicians union and say that you can play the trombone. You won't get any work until you can prove that you can play it. But you can say you're a trombonist, and you can go out and have a go, at playing the trombone in front of 20 people. But it might not be very good trombone. But you can say you're a trombonist.
Yeah.
But not until you get the work coming in can you say you're a professional trombonist.
Yeah, I often joke with a couple of friends of mine, because people sometimes put the word comedian in their name on Facebook. Yeah. And I'm like, you can do that all you want.
Yeah, I know. Well, I can say I'm a ballet dancer, but I'm not going to get any work.
You've not tried.
Yeah.
So if we end on this one then, do you have, if you could give one bit of advice, or maybe just a few nuggets of advice that you've learned over the years?
To performers or to...
To people who want to start a club, and maybe to performers as well,
performers, think about what you want to say and how you want to say it or do it. Do what you think is funny, and keep trying. And it's not going to happen overnight unless you're very, very lucky. But it will happen eventually if you keep doing it and you follow what you think is funny, because that audience will find you. And in terms of promoting shows, respect your audiences, respect your acts. Make sure both are looked after in terms of payment or in terms of what you give the customer, value and quality. It's easy to start a shit club, but it's not going to last. People won't come back. And it's easy to be a shit act, but until you sort it out, nobody will book you.
When you say, one last thing then. When you say a good comedy night, there's sort of a through line for what most people think that includes. But then, there's idiosyncrasies between everyone's definition of that. Do you have a specific...
Well, there's some very practical things. Have a focus in the room where the stage is or the carpet. Make sure people can see it and hear it properly, so it's well lit. Don't put round tables out where, by definition, a quarter of the audience has got their back to the stage. That's simple stuff, I would add, personally, that, you have somebody that greets people when they come in, somebody on the door, taking tickets or shaking the bucket before and after, however you want to do it. But, the comedy nights should be curated properly. You can't just throw 18 people on and not think about what you're doing, And I do see a lot of that. A lot of people just chuck a bill together because they know the 5 names they're putting on it, and they don't think about how the night is structured. Don't have goth music playing as the audience comes in because it's your favourite album, because it's going to put them in the wrong mood. Think about things like that. It's show business. It is show. It's not people chatting.
And sorry, and one last question about... Cause
this is your third last question.
I know. It's because you...
Got to put my clothes back on in a minute.
You said people would leave if you saw your penis.
Yes, well, that's exactly what I was saying.
What does that say about me? One of the things you said was keep doing it, the audience will find you.
As a performer?
As a performer.
Yeah. I mean, if you've got the stage to do it on, when I say the audience will find you, excuse me, if you have an individual voice that is not an ersatz Eddie Izzard or an ersatz Jimmy Carr or Harry Hill or whatever, people that you may want to be like. If you find your own voice and you can make it enjoyable and humorous, then the bookings will come, and then audiences will see you, and then audiences will become loyal to you and say, I like that because I chime with that. That he or she says something that I understand and is universal, to my world. There will always be another you out there wanting to listen to you, but you have to find a way of communicating that, and then, having found a way of communicating it, find the spaces to do it in.
That's the key.
Yeah, but has ever been the case. Whether you were an opera singer in 1910 or whatever, there are places to do it, and places to be seen, and places to learn. And each comedy club in the country is part of that honeycomb that's interconnected.
So in a way, also pick what gigs you do, because
if you've got if you've got the luxury of that, then yes.
Well, no, but I mean, you could make an effort to try and apply to at least gigs that you think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are performers who I won't name who do this room and not others because they, some years ago they realised that they don't really want to have to deal with a certain type of audience because it's not suitable for their material. And there's no point in banging your head against the brick wall trying to get something subtle, laughed at when you're fighting a disinterested crowd.
Okay, that's interesting. All right, well, thank you very much.
Good.
That was Peter. I really enjoyed chatting to him. He's such a nice guy, and he's so learned about the circuit and quite knowledgeable about how it is, why it is. I really liked how candid and open he was, and he's got sort of a nice sense of humour about him as well. He's just such a good guy to be around. And I want to thank you for coming on because, as I said, he doesn't really do podcasts normally. He doesn't really do interviews. He likes to stay in the background, which is admirable and interesting in itself. I hope you enjoyed this. If you did, you can look up a few other podcasts by promoters. I've got one from Jeff Whiting from about 2 months ago. I've got one from Alfie Nooks from about 2-3 weeks ago. Check them out. You can find them on the website or on iTunes. If you're enjoying this content and you want more of it, I've got some TV people lined up, I've got some radio people lined up, I've got some more Edinburgh people lined up, and also some people who've written books lined up. So please do subscribe, it really helps out. Please leave it a rating in iTunes if you're enjoying this and you want to keep it going. The guests are reading it before they're coming on. So if you have time to give me it takes 20-30 seconds to leave me a quick review or just hit 5 stars on there or whatever. It really helps and it really gives the guests sort of a good feeling about coming on before they RSVP. So if you have a moment, please do that. Also join the Facebook group. As I said before, we're always having discussions in there and sharing content about trying to build audiences and sharing information about the industry in general. You can join if you're not a performer. It's not exclusive to that. The only reason why the group is a private group or it's like a not completely open group is so that I can stop spam, because I don't want just spammers joining and putting up pictures of sunglasses and saying, oh, buy these Ray-Bans, they're really cheap. No. So join, you'll all get accepted. I'll just do a quick vetting process, it's not a problem. If you would like to support the podcast and you're enjoying this, please put a monetary value on the episode, what you thought this was worth. £1, £2, £3, £4. Chuck it my way on PayPal. That'd be amazing. If you listen to 5 episodes, you think they're worth £2 each, chuck me a tenner. That'd be amazing. If you want to do that on an ongoing basis, please become a patron of the podcast. If you go to patreon.com, patreon.com/Ask the Industry Podcast, you can support the podcast from $1 an episode. I do 3 episodes a month. It will cost you $3. That's £2.40 to keep this show going. If enough of you do it, I'll have time to take more time off my day job, and I'll be able to pump the time into making live shows, which I've already started kind of doing. I've sort of started sourcing an Edinburgh panel and a reviewer panel. So if you're interested in that and you want that to happen, please do become a patron and help me out. Otherwise, you can help out is just by sharing the links with people and just passing them around, and I'm forever grateful for people that do that. As I said before, my Edinburgh show, please come see me. It's called Buddhism and Cats. It is no longer at Cowgate Head. It is at Just the Tonic Caves, and it is on 7:30 p.m. every night. You can find it on the website for Ed Fringe, but you can also find it on my website. Ignore the program is what I'm saying, because the program listing is wrong. The next episode is going to be with Ben Williams. He is the comedy editor at Time Out, and I had so much fun talking to him. We got into so much detail about how the process works at Time Out, how the internet has impacted them when they went free, how they've had to keep just keeping their traffic going because he needs to get a certain amount of hits in a month in order to validate his job, because obviously they get paid for advertising more than anything else. So I think you're going to get a lot out of that. If you can't wait for that and you're interested in how to market your show more and different publications, go back. I think it was episode 4 or 5. I got the Londonist on, who are a publication based around London, but it will give you a really good insight into how local blog listings work in your area anyway. So it's worth listening to, and it's worth just giving it I think that one was only about an hour. So feel free to get that one as well. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you so much for donating or becoming a patron. I'll see you next time. Bye.